and I hate this poster. I really do, because it's like, this looks like Full House.
It does. Oh man, it does.
Earlier in the show, we talked about like superhero movies this year, just kind of suck, for the most part. I mean, not all of them. I'm saying no stinkers, but no real like movies that were just like.
They've all been kind of within the
on the lower side of the tier, basically. Mm-hmm. And this one came out, and I was just like, okay, Spider-Man: Far From Home. Let me go see this or whatever. Saw it, and I was like, oh, this was actually good. I was actually pleasantly surprised. And did I go in with lowered expectations? Probably a little lower than normal. I would definitely say that, but it doesn't take away from the quality of the film. Like, the quality of the film is still a good film. Mm-hmm. And this is, going back to what we talked about before. It's kind of sucky that the best superhero film or geek culture film that's come out this year is just good. It's like, it's not great. It's not just like this monumental film where you just want to be like, that's going to go down as one of the classics. It's just good. It's kind of sad in that regard. If you think about it, the year in review so far, up to now it's just July.
Trying to think, I would definitely say that versus a lot of the other movies, this one did not have pacing problems like some of the others have. It was a very fast 2.5 hours, however long it was.
Yes. The movie is not without its faults, so it has a pretty messy beginning, and part of it's not even the movie's fault. The thing is, like, I have noticed this with Spider-Man, and Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home have almost had to kind of fix some things that the MCU has kind of messed up or whatever. Because, Spider-Man in Civil War, it makes no sense for Tony to recruit Spider-Man. A 15-year-old kid from Queens, yes, he's out there superhero and stuff, but it makes no sense. He's all about, we need to be more responsible. Let me go get this little kid or whatever, regardless of the fact that a kid died, which is why you were feeling that way to begin with. But, that was Civil War. So Spider-Man Homecoming kind of recognized it was like, well, they're a pair now. Let's explore that. Let's give them more of a relationship. And I would say that was probably one of the better things about Spider-Man Homecoming was the relationship between Peter and Tony Stark. Mm-hmm. And Tony really came across as a father figure to Peter, and Peter looked up to him as this father figure / mentor, because he's grown up with his aunt. He doesn't have that male figure in his life, and nothing. I mean, I grew up with my grandma, but still, it's nice to have that male figure to also to look up to and kind of latch on to. And so, like, you understood and you got that they actually fleshed that out a little bit. But it was just like, it was a victim of circumstances. Like, well, we have to do this. We have to do something with this, So I was glad that they were able to do that. And because, in later movies, their relationship, it's emotional, like when Peter dies in Infinity War, it's just like, oh man, that hurts. But you also feel so bad for Tony in that regard, and the other way around, it's just like when Tony dies, it's like you see that really weigh on Peter, and that's something that's brought into this film. You see like the weight, and you also see the I would say, like, because he's almost in Tony's shadow. In a certain regard, and people are treating him in that way. It's like, oh, are you the next Iron Man or whatever? Pressure eventually gets to him. He almost has a panic attack, just like Tony in a sense. But like, of that amount of pressure on him when he's already just kind of relegated to himself to just like, no, I'm just this neighborhood Spider-Man, I'm just, this is where my boundaries are right here.
I like my little area.
Yeah.
Don't just
so
let me stay there.
Exactly. Like but he almost does it to a detriment. And I would say that's, that's a good character writing for that in that regard, because he feels like he doesn't even have like the potential to even live up to certain things or whatever. And I'm just like, if you think about it, it's like, dude, you fought in a war, like literally fought in a war twice. You might die the first time, but you got the extra life, got the one up. You went in there, you reset, got back in there. You fought in a war, so, but so to feel like that you would never measure up to something like that, I get it. I definitely understand. Like nobody's going to replace Iron Man. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to replace Tony Stark, but at the same time, it's like you have to have that confidence in yourself, and that was part of Peter's journey through this film.
Oh, for sure.
But getting back to like some of the issues in the beginning of this movie, like I said, one of them's not the movie's fault. It has to acknowledge the snap, and I would say this when they first started introducing and started talking about it, it's the little news report that they have on that they have in their school or whatever, led by Betty and her co-host or whatever. They're talking about it, and they show the footage, from the camera that's filming the basketball game, and you see people start to disintegrate, and you hear people scream. It's horrifying at first. Like when I saw it, I was just like, wait, I wasn't ready for this.
Yeah, bad.
Yeah, and then they bring it, the Endgame happens, and then everyone pops back into existence. They call it the blip or whatever, but everyone like literally pops back into existence, and it's like they had to acknowledge that because that's what happened. But at the same time, you're just like, you look at the situation and you're just like, well, this just makes the whole thing worse, because all right, so people popped back into existence at the same area where they left. I'm like, so nobody like just popped back into existence inside of somebody. There was no deformities. What about the people in airplanes? What about the people in helicopters? People in cars? People that were standing in the middle of the street or whatever. So it's just like, yeah, millions of people still died, and this doesn't make things better. I know you were trying to set up a joke here and stuff, and I'm just like, I know you had to acknowledge it, but I'm like, you'd have been better off leaving that out. I understand you're trying to incorporate certain things, but you'd have been better off leaving that out.
Yeah, that was definitely a case of don't show it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's showing, like, let the magic be so that you can kind of think it worked out. Magic portals opening where people can come through them. Okay, that works. Having people rematerialize in the middle of a basketball game, it's probably the best idea.
Exactly. You introduce a whole new world of, questions that are already pretty much, a lot of people had, but now it's just like, now they definitely have them. It's like, well, what the heck, But the other issue with the beginning of this movie is that Peter is pretty much in love with MJ. And you're thinking to yourself, like, through the sequence of events that have happened, from Homecoming, the love interest was Liz Allen. And he was all about Liz Allen or whatever. Now, you could tell that MJ, a.k.a. Melissa, I'm actually going to call her Melissa through the rest of this. I'm not going to call her MJ. Even though the movie decides to call her that, I'm going to call her Melissa. But Melissa obviously had somewhat of a crush on Peter. And that's, if you didn't know, like, that's obviously made very obvious at the end of the movie. Like, she has a little bit of a crush on Peter. So I got that and understood that. So you have Spider-Man Homecoming, Infinity War happens, he dies, he comes back 5 years, 5 years later. They come back 5 years later because she was part of the, the whole, the blip too. So they come back 5 years later, and suddenly he's in love with Melissa. And I'm like, when did that happen? I get why, but I'm like, when did this happen? When did this romance? When did you have such a crush on her or whatever? When that was never established. Now, granted, as the movie goes along, you're just kind of like, fine, if this is where you're going, then look, we're just gonna have to deal with it, But it doesn't take away the fact that you didn't establish this. You didn't introduce this beforehand. So all of a sudden, we're just supposed to be like, okay. And the only reason I could think of was like, well, Peter and MJ. they're supposed to be together because Peter and MJ. And I'm like, no, that's not that's not how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to actually develop the relationship and everything. And you had ample time to do it. You had a whole movie to do it, and it would have been nice to see that relationship blossom to where Peter actually does start to fall for her a little bit. But they decided to go that route, I guess the easy route or a lazy route, however you want to call it. They decided to go that route, and that's, yeah, so it's kind of like, where did that come from? I would say, as far as other negatives, it's a little it's very predictable. It's nothing that's really going to, like, if you're not, how do I... Oh, look, I'm just gonna say it. And if you couldn't tell from the trailers or anything, which I would kind of understand, but the second you start watching this movie, you know Mysterio's the villain. You know, I mean, it's like, you know, he's coming up with this multiverse theory, and he's telling, you know, it's just like, oh, I'm from another world, and the elementals did X, Y, and Z. They destroyed this planet, so I had to come here to try to protect your planet, to keep your world from happening from the same thing that happened to my world. You know, I was just like, and I'm listening to this, and I'm like, y'all believe this? Y'all believe even Mysterio's even looking like, just like, hey, y'all believe that story? There was actually a wasted potential to have to have Flash Thompson as the foil in this movie. I was confused by that, because I'm like, this Flash Thompson. He's known as the bully to Spider-Man, or like in this case, he's more of just like the guy that gives Peter a hard time, and you know, just makes life a little bit rough for Peter.
Yeah, they kind of just turned him self-obsessed in this movie.
Right, exactly, and it was like nothing against the character that they used. They used this new character known, and his name is Brad. But he's the guy that's around. Yeah, it's always a Brad. But he's the guy that's around, and he's giving Peter a hard time. You know, as far as his romance with Melissa, and his and just in general, just like, oh, why has Peter always disappeared? There's no one paying attention to this, and I'm just like, I respect him as a foil, but I'm like, you don't need him. You already have somebody to do that for you. So why introduce this new character to do that? You know what I'm saying? It's weird. You know, it's just like, you already got somebody who's a foil to Peter and has been known to be a foil. So why bring in somebody else who, being perfectly honest, you don't really care all that much about? You know, like he's kind of barely in the movie, but it's like when he's in there, he's the character that's like just to give Peter a hard time, you know. You know, you don't really get any like sort of development with him or anything like that. It's just kind of like, he's the obstacle that Peter has to overcome.
Yeah, he's the what do you call it? He's the MJ road speed bump.
Yes,
that's his
exactly.
That's kind of his role through the whole movie. It's kind of the most one dimensional of the characters.
Yes, it definitely probably he might be the only one. If I'm being honest, like he might be the only one. Like as far as being one dimensional, maybe Flash a little bit, but Flash is not in here enough to really make any kind of a decision about it. Like you said, he was like more like the self-obsessed character. He's running his YouTube channel, whatever, doing his vlogs and stuff like that. So,
yeah, he's kind of the social media outlet for the
you know, kind of touch on the character of Fury. Like he comes across as goofy, little incompetent at times. Now he does actually, he does have moments of competency, and he actually does resemble the Nick Fury that you've come to know as of late, and does actually, he pushes Peter. And I was like, yeah, Peter needs this. He needs this push, you know. Like Stark left him, some things that Stark entrusted to him and everything, and because Stark saw his potential and everything. Nick Fury also sees his potential. Well, this version of Nick Fury, anyway, but also sees that potential. But I would argue that Nick Fury does see his potential. Otherwise, he wouldn't have bothered with him in the first place. But he sees that potential, so he pushes him, but he does it in his Nick Fury way. It's like, whereas Tony is gonna push you and goad you to get going in his way.
Yeah.
Like Steve is would do it in his way. Nick Fury is doing it in his Nick Fury way, and it's like it's true to the character in that regard. Is where like he's really hard on Peter. But at the same time, Peter kind of needs that. He needs like somebody to just like, hey, look, this is how it is. You got these powers. You're going to decide what you want to do with them. But at the same time, I do need you. So you can decide, but you can decide on your own time. This is my time right now. And he actually does some things he manipulates certain things and to get Peter to help out because he does need him.
I think in a way, Nick Fury in this movie gave Peter a hard time in a lot of ways that Nick Fury gave Tony a hard time in the first Avengers.
Actually, yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, very good point.
There's lots of trust me, this movie is full of Iron Man and parallels. It's
yes. I'm saying like, there's these flaws that the movie has, but for all it does, like, for all that's wrong with it, there's a lot good. It does a lot right. And the main thing was just like the overall, I would say the teenagers. The teenagers feel like teenagers. They don't feel like preteens like they did in Spider-Man Homecoming, where they're just dialed to 11, and I'm just like, calm down, But no, they feel like real teenagers. The awkwardness level is there. The self-absorbedness is there. And stuff. The puppy love and stuff like that.
Puppy love, awkwardness. Just not behaviors that make sense to teenagers, but that we're as an adult, you kind of look back on and say,
exactly. You start freaking out about things that like that may not matter as much as you really think.
Right. Yes.
It's like but it had that feel. It just kind of like brought you. It almost kind of just brought you back to like when you're to your life as a teenager. You're just like this is what it felt like, Yep. So really having that feel, and like you said, it was like kind of reminiscent of the '80s John Hughes movies, which is, from what I understand, that was the goal that they were trying to go for in Spider-Man Homecoming. You didn't hit it all that much, but in this movie, they definitely
they definitely hit the mark on that.
Yeah, so like that was very good. Tom Holland has just grown as an actor, and like he brings some real raw emotion to this role, and you feel, even though like this is a comedy, you feel the weight that's on him. He's oh man, it's almost like, it's like, okay, yes, this movie is definitely in the action comedy realm or whatever, but they've Tom Holland and obviously the directors and the filmmakers have actually brought such a humanity and almost maturity level to the film, to this character, and to bring out like this. It's like, some funny stuff is happening here and there, but at its core, it's just like, he still has worries and fears and stuff like that. It's not just like a happy-go-lucky type thing, like like stuff's not, it's like, he still has deep concerns, putting his family in danger, putting his friends in danger and stuff like that. It's like, and wanting to kind of live a normal life. It's like, will I ever get that? I'm a kid and I've been kind of thrust into this role, and I don't know that I'm ready for that. I'm not Iron Man, I'm not Captain America, I'm not Thor, I'm not any of those guys. But it was,
he's a little lost.
Yes.
And the mentor that he had, his Obi-Wan's gone.
Exactly.
So he's kind of having that weird self-doubt sort of thing. He never, what was it? The the idea of the next guy standing up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's supposed to be the next guy to stand up, but he wasn't quite prepared, not ready to be the next guy yet.
Exactly. And that's that I would say that's quintessential Spider-Man right there. Just getting that. This is the most Spider-Man that I've seen a Spider-Man since probably the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, you know. Now, granted, that was its own thing. It had its own feel, its own campy nature or whatever. But, like, it's like when I think about, like, Spider-Man and Peter Parker, I'm like, yeah, that's Spider-Man and Peter Parker. When I saw this movie, you know, like, Homecoming was fine. I like nothing against Homecoming. I like Homecoming for what it is. But, like, this movie was like, I looked at this character and I said, yes, this is Spider-Man and this is Peter Parker. This is the, you know, this is the turmoil that he has. Like, yeah, stuff happens around him. That's funny. But he's still, like, the humor's not so over the top that it's not grounded. You know, like, the movie's more grounded. I would say that.
Well, this is an example of, a good example of a movie that, while funny, does take itself seriously enough to keep you grounded into it. It's not Ragnarok.
Right.
It's actually, well, it's sort of Ant-Man-y, you know, in a way, but it's much more well done than the Ant-Man so far. Yeah.
Exactly. And once you like, you know, you see this vulnerability and you see these issues that he's going through, it leads him to make some not so good decisions. You understand why he makes them, but you know, and you understand like they're a bit rash, they're a bit, you know, rushed, they're a bit like not completely thought out. But let's be real, like, you know, this is a teenager who's dealing with, you know, superpowers and a level of responsibility that he doesn't believe that he's ready for. So when he sees somebody, aka Mysterio, who's, you know, kind of almost kind of being that Tony character, but in a different way, in a sense, like, you know, if Nick Fury was the heavy, he's the, you know, the fist or whatever, like, you know, Mysterio was, or that character was just kind of being like, or, you know, he was the hand on the shoulder type thing. And yes, Peter did need both of them, but it was like, you know, you understood why he gravitated to him so much, you know, just that out of that need, and just like the need to have like somebody to look up to, but also the need to have somebody help take the responsibility off his shoulders.
Yeah, he I think that's one thing about the kind of plot to the film is that, like, the characters stay true to the characters.
Yes.
And I don't feel like the writers came up with anything really truly that felt contrived and not in character.
Right.
Yes. So the motivation, especially Peter's motivations on things, was pretty good. Now, the villain's backstory and his motivations and all that, that's something a little different. But I would say especially for Peter's character, everything really kind of flowed and felt like it was really him.
Yes, exactly. Since you talked about the villain, the biggest comparison I can make to this character, and you said it perfectly, is just like Spider-Man is having to deal with an Iron Man villain. That is essentially what Mysterio is. He is an Iron Man villain that, you know, was really thrust upon Peter. And if you want to know his backstory, just watch Incredibles. It's pretty much the same. You know, he's pretty much Syndrome from The Incredibles. I mean, it's almost like dangerously close to that or whatever. And that's part of why it was so predictable to me, because like I saw that coming a mile away. So I'm just like, well, yeah, because I saw The Incredibles. Now, granted, Syndrome wasn't on screen a lot in The Incredibles. He was in the beginning, and then he came back at the end, and you saw, okay, made that tie-in, whenever it's like, oh, he's the villain and stuff like that. But here was more like, you know, he was more prominent throughout the film, so you were able to kind of make that form that conclusion a lot quicker, because you're like, oh yeah. So and there is a very long thank you speech that he gives it's both funny, but it runs on way too. I don't know if it's actually they did it on purpose or not, because he congratulates everyone. He has this whole crew that comes up with these special effects, and he congratulates everyone. You did a good job because you put this together.
It's almost like a Guardians of the Galaxy kind of humor in the way that it's delivered.
Yeah, and I was like, but it ran on so long that I was just like, are y'all doing this on purpose? Because I mean, he's congratulating. I was waiting for him to congratulate catering after a while. I was just like, hey, you came through with that water just when we needed it. We gotta stay hydrated, and you were always on top of that. You know, I was waiting for that. I was waiting for, like, you know, congratulate HR. It's like, hey, look, we had that one issue. We never had any sexual harassment issues, and that's we have you to thank for that. You know, you that sensitivity training, spot on. Something I will say about the character. I get his motivations. I definitely get his motivations. It's a little bit. It's almost akin to the Vulture that I have a slight issue with, because it's just like, oh, well, this person treated me bad. I'm a supervillain. That's my only course of action right now. I'm just like, I'm sure, like, you know, because, you know, the Vulture was just in the or rather Toomes, Mr. Toomes in Spider-Man Homecoming was like, oh, we're not going to get this job or whatever, and like Tony Stark's, you know, crew is going to take over, we're going to be out of money or whatever, and it's like, well, guess I'll become a criminal. And I'm like, wow, that was a big leap. I was like, you just did that all again? That's your only course of action, huh? And I'm like, okay, fine. But this character was more for, he wanted glory, you know, and Tony never gave that to him. Even when he probably rightfully deserved it, he never got it. And, you know, his passion for just being in the limelight wound up taking over. You don't, unfortunately, get to experience a lot of that. It's definitely told to you. You get it, but you don't get to experience a lot of that. So you don't get like the, you know, the sympathetic villain or whatever that you would normally get. It's like, yeah, I understand your motivations, but I don't connect with you on that particular level. I would say he's a smarter villain than most, because there are certain times where certain things are going wrong, and yeah, you know what? It's almost, it's like a director, and it's very meta in that regard. It was just like, well, they're like, oh, this drone's not working or whatever. Why is that drone not working? And you're just like, oh, it's just probably, you know, it's probably a glitch. We got plenty of others. Like, no. Why is that drone not working? You know, it's like everything has to be going and working the way it's supposed to be working. And when it doesn't, he's like, no, why? You know, he wants to know why. And whereas other movies would take that and would just like use that as an excuse for the hero to kind of get a drop on the villain. No, he's actually smart enough to go in and see like, oh, Spider-Man's been messing with this. Let me do this and try to divert that. Let me try to correct that action or whatever. And you don't see that a lot from villains. The special effects, especially during the end sequence, the end sequence with all the illusions that Mysterio is bringing. Amazing. Amazing. It is one of those moments where as a general fan, you're enjoying yourself or whatever, but as a comic fan, you are geeking the frick out, because like this is Spider-Man using his spider sense at its full potential. You're just like, yes, you finally get to see that, and you get to see what he can actually do with it, and how, you know, and how it benefits him and everything. So now I'm gonna say one thing, that this was a little bit awkward, but stop the Peter Tingle joke. Please stop that. At least, you know, if he's saying it to himself and in a self-referential kind of like joke or whatever, I'm fine with that. But I don't need Happy Hogan coming up, you know, 40-year-old Happy Hogan talking to a 16-year-old kid about just like, oh, you're Peter Tingle. I'm like, no, stop. Stop that.
One thing I will say about the special effects, and I guess you could call it the special enemy, it's that sequence. There's a sequence, I guess 2/3 through or something, the kind of hallucinogenic sequence.
Yes.
Oh, it was good.
Yes.
That was good. That was worth the price of seeing the movie.
Yes.
I mean, it's like Doctor Strange style, but done I mean, we're talking like marching pink elephants here, man. It was good.
Yeah, like somebody saw that, like they saw that Doctor Strange scene, and it was just like, oh, that was pretty good. Watch this. Yeah, that it's that good. It's really that good. So yeah, just a good movie overall. I was very, very pleasantly surprised because I mean I wasn't expecting it to be bad. I was just but then again I wasn't expecting Endgame to be bad either. But I wasn't expecting it to be bad. I was really kind of expecting more of that Spider-Man Homecoming, and I was just gonna take it as it was. It was just like, oh, it's just fun little popcorn movie or whatever, just to go out and see. It's just like it's the movie that kind of brings you down from the what is it, the I guess the hype of Endgame or whatever. Kind of like Ant-Man and the Wasp was like that movie that just kind of like, all right, this is a movie to kind of like calm you down from Infinity War and everything. It was just a feel-good movie in that regard. But this was a feel-good movie that was actually good. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I know you really enjoyed it.
I did. Yeah. It was fun. I mean, it wasn't, again, it's not epic per se. I'm sorry, it's not it's not epic per se, but it's good. It fits. It does a really good job at being the movie that it is.
Yes, very much so.